Howdy howdy. No Man's Sky Singularity is definitely one of Hello Games' weirder releases. As a player, I've been confused by its unintentionally staggered launch and various progress delaying bugs. As a content creator, I've been confused by the vague mystery I'm trying to unravel. And as a No Man's Sky fanboy, I've been torn between wanting to talk about how poor this expedition's rollout has been, but also how cool the rest of it is. So, what the heck. I'll just talk about everything. I'm Kanaju, and No Man's Sky Singularity confuses me. These are my initial impressions and thoughts on the latest expedition. Let's start at the beginning. No Man's Sky Expedition 10 Singularity launched on Wednesday, June 7th, 2023, for all platforms. According to its announcement, anyways, as only PC and Mac actually received the update on that day. Now, it's pretty normal for patches to arrive at different times on different platforms, but for an expedition that's marketed as an ARG tie-in, that's an alternate reality game tie-in, it was a bit frustrating to witness. It's not the end of the world or anything, but PC and Mac players got the expedition on Wednesday, Xbox players got it Thursday, and PlayStation players had to wait until Friday, late Friday for PS4. And to be honest, I don't even know the status of the expedition on Nintendo Switch. The website doesn't seem to include it on the list of platforms. So this doesn't seem like an intentional choice, given that the expedition's announcement on the website mentioned all platforms, and it was announced on the PlayStation blog on Wednesday, despite it, not being on PlayStation for another couple days. Not to mention, it wouldn't really make any sense to stagger the release. But since Hello Games refused to comment on the delays, which, is per usual, plenty of folks were genuinely freaking out. They were tossing insults, sharing conspiracy theories, and just generally being miserable. It was actually pretty sad to watch because I didn't think it was really that big of a deal, delays happen. That said though, I wasn't exactly happy about the delays or the lack of communication myself. I understand that if Hello Games were to actually put out a statement, then games media would probably pick it up and turn it into a story, and then the negative Nellies outside of the community would have a field day with that. But of course, the silence wasn't really much better. Again, the delay wasn't a big deal at all, it happens, but the melodrama surrounding the silence was just so unnecessary, and it seems like it could have been easily prevented with a simple statement about, patches arriving on consoles as soon as possible. Nothing detailed, but just a little confirmation for those who needed it. But okay, launch aside, how is the actual expedition? Minor spoilers for the expedition, though most everything new was already shown briefly in the trailer, so I wouldn't worry too much. Gameplay-wise, it's kind of a mixed bag. On one hand, it features a lot of interactions that are new for the expedition. That's always great to see. A new space encounter, a new gameplay mechanic, and new mysteries to unravel. On the other hand, the milestones do feel a bit more repetitive than usual, which is probably strange to hear. They fall more into the chore category than the adventure one for me personally. On a conceptual level though, it's definitely one of the most unique and coherent expeditions to date. The theme, the narrative, the characters, it all feels very ominous, like it's building up to something dark or epic. And there are tons of clues to discover, which I'll cover those a little bit in a couple minutes. However, as cool as the expedition kind of is, the bugs have been a real pain. The opening milestones were a bit confusing, and they don't function properly if you do them out of order, which happened to me on stream, funny enough. And there's also a weird bug where you'll get pulled out of pulse and the game will tell you to board a derelict when your actual rendezvous is on a planet. To fix it, I had to switch milestones and switch back in order to get the marker to reappear. And I've heard of a bunch of folks having trouble with the rampancy milestone, and some players are even seeing their expedition saves converted to normal saves without being able to complete the expedition first, which that sounds like a major issue, if I'm being honest. To be frank though, these types of bugs are actually pretty typical for an expedition release, as bad as that sounds. However, when you take those bugs that make milestones confusing to complete and you combine them with a confusing launch schedule, a somewhat confusing narrative, and a confusing community goal, which I'll talk about in a minute, folks are going to be confused, right, one way or another. It's one thing to make an expedition full of mystery, which is, I think, what we all want, but it's another thing to make it confusing. Now, I hope I'm not coming off as too negative about this, because I mean no shade to Hello Games. I love their work, and I know they're already hard at work fixing bugs and releasing patches. They love this game the same way we do. I just admittedly find it difficult to praise all the fantastic stuff they're giving us without mentioning the hurdles players are having to jump over to enjoy it. And speaking of giant hurdles, let's talk about that community goal. Community goals. Now, on a conceptual level, I like it. Minor spoiler alert, but we need to gather tens, if not hundreds of thousands of echo seeds as a community in order to advance the story. Now, until that goal is met, no one is able to complete the expedition yet, outside of bugs and exploits, of course. Now, from a story perspective, I think it makes sense that so many echo seeds would be needed. From a live service perspective, it also makes sense. Since most expeditions are over in 4 to 5 hours, this will extend people's playtime and keep the community engaged for possibly weeks to come. It also builds up the finale, making it more exciting when we finally reach the top of that hill. Plus, it brings the community together to work on a singular goal. That all sounds pretty good. The problem is, from a single player's perspective, it kind of sucks. You gather a bunch of these echo seeds, which is pretty repetitive, a whole bunch, and then you drop them in one at a time. Now, there's no visible change in the community percentage since it's such a huge amount. So when you drop them in, it sort of feels like you're not really making a difference. It's not very satisfying, in other words. What's worse, though, is the confusion that spawned from this particular community mission. For example, it seems that a player's progress doesn't count if your access to Discovery servers is cut off. At least that's what I've heard people say. Haven't verified it myself. But most players probably wouldn't check for their Discovery server being connected or not. And also, progress seemed crazy slow for the first few days because most players were still waiting on the expedition to actually arrive on their platform. It was at 10% when I was playing on Saturday evening, 3 days after launch, which made it seem like it'll take forever to actually complete. Plus, there are tiers, and I think the first one was just hit, and I don't know what they do. So, on top of that, there was also a post on the subreddit which circulated about timers. You know, people found timers in the game files, which made it seem like, well, all of the contributions people were making were meaningless because the goal would complete at a certain time anyways. That's not the case, and luckily it's been disproven and people are working hard to try and, fix that misinformation. But apparently it did make a noticeable impact on progress once people saw that because they stopped working on the goal. A slight one, but somewhat noticeable. So again, there's a lot of confusion about the game mechanics rather than the narrative itself, which is what we should be confused about. But let me tell you, I think the narrative and the choice it's setting up are fascinating. So I haven't beat the expedition yet. Really, no one has. But full spoilers for everything up to the community goal in Phase 5. I want to do a whole video going over every detail. But right now, I just want to give you my impressions. And overall, I'm loving the narrative focus of this expedition. The return of the Atlantid, the coming storm, these strange constructs, it all feels so authentically No Man's Sky. In fact, it feels like the real culmination of everything the game's been building up to. The fact that Sean called this a part 2 of a 4-part arc has me extremely excited. It means they actually have a plan, a roadmap, and probably a story in mind. It also implies that they're actually building up to something that may or may not be truly epic later this year. Now, I know I always preach that we should keep our expectations low, lest we let ourselves down, but come on. It seems like it's building up to something, right? I mean, they haven't done an evolving story since 2020, and it wasn't near as cool as this one. It didn't have all the custom stuff, it didn't have like physical representations of the Abyss. Plus, we appear to be getting a new race for the first time since the Travelers in 2017. Unless you count the anomalies in 2018, but that's more of a cosmetic distinction, I suppose. Still, a new race with new customization, new lore, new interactions, and possibly new tech and architecture as well. Who knows, right? It gets me excited just at the thought. People have been asking for a new race for a long time. Then there's the fact that the Abyss is closer to revealing themselves than ever before. We thought at the end of the 2020 season of weekend missions that we would finally be fighting the Abyss. But that fight never came. However, with Interceptor, we finally got the first glimpse of the Atlantid's new form. Dissonant worlds, crystallized corruption, corrupted sentinels, and even more. Singularity expands on these elements and their backstories. It's all very exciting, feels very cohesive, and it seems to finally be building up to a confrontation of some kind. The expedition will supposedly feature a choice, and this isn't much of a spoiler, it's in the blog post, but between the Abyss and the Atlas, shown through these helmets as either Atlantid or Crimson customization. Now, what that means for the future of the game, I don't know. The Abyss promises escape from the simulation of the Atlas, but how? And at what cost? To what end? And in what form will you be free? While the Atlas promises nothing as far as I've seen. I'm sure the rest of Phase 5 will explain what each choice means, but for now, knowing what I know, I'm actually kind of torn on which to choose. On one hand, the Atlas has never shown any malevolence, but it is doomed to die. But on the other hand, the Abyss is promising freedom. However, the Abyss is known to act in its own interests, so joining up may just make me a pawn to my own detriment. It's tough to say, so I can't wait to see how the narrative chooses to present these choices. I also can't wait to see what comes out of this construct and all the souls we've been gathering. Golly, there's so much to cover. Plus, the codes hidden in system discovery names, the messages from the new Atlantids, the Fragments, and so much more. Now, worry not, I will go into detail about everything we know so far, but in another video. I need more time to compile everything and figure out what it could actually mean. The thought of another ARG is super duper exciting. I'll do my best to cover it, but admittedly, smarter people than I usually solve things first. But that's a-okay with me. It's all part of the fun. Alright, so those are my first impressions of No Man's Sky Singularity. It's a fascinating narrative with huge potential that's been somewhat obscured by bugs and community drama. Not to mention, we don't know if they'll actually stick the landing or not, so all of that buildup may or may not pay off. We'll see soon enough, I guess. In the meantime, feel free to share your impressions in the comments below. Are you enjoying the Echo Seed grind, or do you wish we could just get on with it? What do you think of the story so far? What are you looking forward to or hoping for? Let's see it in the comments below. And don't forget to report any bugs you encounter yourself to Hello Game Zendesk. I'll leave a link in the description because that's always very helpful for them. And if you could leave a like or a dislike on the video, depending on your impressions, that would be great too. Until next time, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!